Marie Antoinette was born on November 2nd, 1755 in Vienna, Austria. She was the 15th and second to last child of Maria Theresa, Empress of Austria, and Holy Roman Emperor Francis I. She lived a relatively carefree childhood, and her education was typical of an 18th century aristocratic girl, and focused primarily on religious and moral principles, while her brothers studied more academic subject matter. With the conclusion of the 7 Years' War in 1763, the preservation of a fragile alliance between Austria and France became a priority for Empress Maria Theresa. Cementing alliances through matrimonial connections was a common practice among European royal families at the time. In 1765, Louis, Dauphin de France, also known as Louis Ferdinand, the son of French monarch Louis XV, died. His death left the king's 11-year-old grandson, Louis Auguste, heir to the French throne. Within months, Marie Antoinette and Louis Auguste, the future King Louis XVI, were pledged to marry each other. In 1768, the King of France, Louis XV, dispatched a tutor to Austria to instruct his grandson's future wife. The tutor found Marie Antoinette more intelligent than has been generally supposed, but added that since she is rather lazy and extremely frivolous, she is hard to teach. Marie Antoinette was a child of only 14 years, delicately beautiful, with grey-blue eyes and ash-blonde hair. In May 1770 she set out for France to be married, escorted by 57 carriages, 117 footmen and 376 horses. Marie Antoinette and Louis Auguste were married on May 16, 1770. The young girl did not adjust well to a married life for which she was obviously not ready, and her frequent letters home revealed intense homesickness. "Madam, my very dear mother," she wrote in one letter, "I have not received one of your dear letters without having the tears come to my eyes." She also bristled at some of the rituals she was expected to perform as a lady of the French royal family. "I put on my rouge and wash my hands in front of the whole world," she complained, referring to a court ritual in which she was required to dress and put on her makeup in front of dozens of courtiers. Louis XV died in 1774, and Louis Auguste succeeded him to the French throne as Louis XVI, making Marie Antoinette at 19 years old Queen of France. The personalities of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette could not have been more different. He was introverted, shy and indecisive, a lover of solitary pleasures such as reading and metalwork. She was vivacious, outgoing and bold, a social butterfly who loved gambling, partying and extravagant fashions. When the king went to bed before midnight, Marie Antoinette's nights of partying and carousing had yet to begin. When she woke up just before noon, he had been at work for hours. Beginning in 1780, Marie Antoinette began spending more and more time at the Petit Trianon, her private castle on the grounds of the Palace of Versailles, almost always without the king. Around this time, the first rumours surfaced about her relationship with the Swedish diplomat Count Axel von Fersen. Word had reached Marie Antoinette's mother that her daughter and Louis had not yet consummated their marriage after 7 years. The king suffered from phimosis, in which tight foreskin can cause painful erections. Unable to become physical with her husband, the young Marie Antoinette turned her gaze to parties, games, and, according to palace rumours, other men. So Empress Maria Theresa immediately dispatched her son, Marie Antoinette's older brother Joseph II, to France to act as a sort of marriage counsellor. Whatever his counsels, they apparently worked. Before departing for Austria, Joseph II gave the couple some much-needed advice. Marie Antoinette needed to become more affectionate with her husband, and Louis XVI should undergo a simple surgery to fix things in the bedroom. In 1778, Marie Antoinette gave birth to their daughter, Marie-Thérèse Charlotte. During the 1780s, countless pamphlets accused Marie Antoinette of ignorance, extravagance, and adultery, some featuring salacious cartoons and others dubbing her Madame Deficit. At the time, the French government was sliding into financial turmoil, and poor harvests were driving up grain prices across the country, making Marie Antoinette's fabulously extravagant lifestyle the subject of popular ire. In fact, the nation's difficulties were not the young queen's fault. 18th century colonial wars, particularly the American Revolution, in which the French had intervened on behalf of the colonists, had created a tremendous debt for the French state. The people who owned most of the property in France, such as the Catholic Church, the First Estate, and the nobility, the Second Estate, generally did not have to pay taxes on their wealth. Ordinary people, on the other hand, felt squeezed by high taxes and resentful of the royal family's conspicuous spending. Louis, coaxed by his politically aware wife, tried to impose a more representative system of taxation, but the nobility resisted, very reluctant to give up the prerogatives of their class. Queen Marie Antoinette admittedly had extravagant taste, and while the coffers of the French kingdom dwindled and the cost of bread skyrocketed, that did not stop Marie Antoinette from spending a fortune on decadent clothes, shoes, wigs, and jewellery, mostly diamonds and pearls. Once she sported a towering bouffant dubbed the Inoculation Pouf, named after the pricey hairpiece depicting a club hitting a snake in an olive tree. The piece celebrated her success in persuading her husband to be vaccinated against smallpox. In 1785, an infamous diamond necklace scandal permanently tarnished the Queen's reputation. A thief posing as Marie Antoinette had obtained a 647 diamond necklace and smuggled it to London to be sold off in pieces. Though Marie Antoinette was innocent of any involvement, she was nevertheless guilty in the eyes of the people. Refusing to let public criticism alter her behaviour, in 1786 Marie Antoinette began building the Hameau de la Reine, an extravagant retreat near the Petit Trianon in Versailles. Marie Antoinette is perhaps best known for the quote, "Let them eat cake." As the story goes, upon hearing that the people had no bread to eat around the start of the French Revolution in 1789, the Queen commented, "Qui le mange de la brioche," brioche being a type of fancy French bread. However, there is no evidence that Marie Antoinette actually uttered these words, and historians generally agree that such a heartless comment would have been highly uncharacteristic of the French Queen. The remark is generally traced back several decades to a version involving le croûte de pâté, another kind of French pastry. The comment was supposedly made by Marie Therese, a Spanish princess who married King Louis XIV in 1660. In fact, Marie Antoinette's true sentiments might have been just the opposite. In a letter to her mother around the time of France's bread shortage, she wrote, "It is quite certain that in seeing the people who treat us so well, despite their own misfortune, we are more obliged than ever to work hard for their happiness." Despite her lavish lifestyle, Marie Antoinette gave to charity and had compassion for her country's common class. Underneath her outrageous behaviour was also a tender young heart. She was described as a compassionate individual by those close to her. She once tended to a peasant gored by a stag and adopted several children. Under the influence of her controlling mother and brother, Marie Antoinette committed one political faux pas after another, pushing for Austrian interests in court. Her French subjects, who were already wary of the foreigner queen from Austria, with which France shared a hostile history, and now they had all the more reason to suspect her of disloyalty. Marie Antoinette, exhausted by her boring royal duties and the animosity she faced at court, preferred to hide away from them at her Petit Trianon compound. This closed clique was another faux pas by the French Queen, as the act inevitably alienated and offended other important officials from the French court, costing her supporters within the palace walls. One anonymous pamphlet from circa 1783 alleged that debauchery and agitation of the passions were observed in Marie Antoinette's life. Men, women, everything was as she liked. She was satisfied with everything. Marie Antoinette was also unfaithful to Louis XVI and fooled him too. Historians argue that the compounded misogynistic slander that painted the Queen as an adulteress also had to do with the fact that King Louis XVI had never taken a mistress, a peculiar practice at the time for a royal. They believed that any animosity that would have been directed at a king's mistress was now transferred squarely to the Queen. Plus, given her penchant for frivolity, she was easy to paint as corrupt. "I love you and will love you madly all my life," Count Fersen wrote to Marie Antoinette in one of their many letters. She in turn wrote back that he was the most loved and loving of men, and unabashedly told him, "My heart is all yours." Their apparent love for one another would prove significant to Marie Antoinette's failed escape after the monarchy's fall. Many believed that at least two of the royal heirs were in fact the result of her amorous affair with Count Fersen, who often lingered by Marie Antoinette's side. While it's impossible to establish the true paternity of her children, we do know that Marie Antoinette exchanged very intimate letters with the Count. On July 14, 1789, 900 French workers and peasants stormed the Bastille prison to take arms and ammunition, marking the beginning of the French Revolution. On October the 6th of that year, the crowds arrived at Versailles. The mob had ballooned to 10,000 people. When someone cried out for the Queen to show herself on the balcony, she did, bowing her head down so low towards the mob of angry Parisians that, for a moment, Her Grace under siege was welcomed with chants of "Long live the Queen!" But Marie Antoinette, having lived under the scrutiny of a critical public gaze for so long, knew that this mood wouldn't last long. "They are going to force us to go to Paris, the King and me, preceded by the heads of our bodyguards on pikes," she said when she retreated back into the palace. Within hours the protesters, indeed carrying pikes stuck with the heads of her guards, captured the royal family and moved them to the old Tuileries Palace in Paris. Once there, the always indecisive Louis XVI acted almost paralyzed, seemingly with fear, and Marie Antoinette immediately stepped into his place, meeting with advisers and ambassadors and dispatching urgent letters to other European rulers, begging them to help save France's monarchy. In a plot hatched primarily by Marie Antoinette and her lover, Count Axel von Fersen, the royal family attempted to escape France in June 1791, but they were captured and returned to Paris. In September of that year, King Louis XVI agreed to uphold a new constitution drafted by the Constituent National Assembly in return for keeping at least his symbolic power. The First French Republic was proclaimed on September the 22nd, 1792. In January, King Louis XVI was executed after being found guilty of high treason by the National Tribune. With his death by the guillotine came the death of the French monarchy. The following words are reported to have been said by Marie Antoinette after the prosecutor read his indictment. "I was a queen, and you took away my crown, a wife, and you killed my husband, a mother, and you deprived me of my children. My blood alone remains, take it, but do not make me suffer long." But little did the fallen queen know then that she would spend 2.5 months before her trial and execution in a noisy, mouldy dungeon that reeked of pipe smoke, rat urine, and poor sanitation. She was only 37 years old, but her hair had already turned white, and her skin was just as pale. Still, she was subjected to an excruciating 36-hour trial crammed into just 2 days. Prosecutor Antoine Quentin Fouquier-Tinville aimed to denigrate her character so that any crime she was accused of would seem more plausible. Thus the trial began with a bombshell. According to Fouquier-Tinville, her 8-year-old son Louis Charles claimed to have had sex with his mother and aunt. In reality, historians believe he made up the story after his jailer caught him masturbating. During the trial, the Queen answered the outrageous charges against her by addressing the women present. "If I have not replied, it is because nature itself refuses to answer such a charge laid against a mother," the former Queen said. "I appeal to all mothers here present. Is it true?" Marie Antoinette's cell was below the level of the prison courtyard. The brick-tiled floor was covered with muddy slime and water trickled down the walls due to the proximity to the Seine. When the river was low, it was possible to see shreds of old wallpaper, decorated, ironically, with the fleur-de-lis. However, the prison wardens Toussaint and Marianne Richard were known to be compassionate and showed their prisoners respect and consideration. They took great risks to provide Marie Antoinette with small comforts: a pillow, a small table with 2 straw chairs, a small wooden box of powder, and a tin of pomade. The Queen and her wardens were under constant surveillance. Only a screen separated the Queen from 2 guards who could be found drinking, smoking, and playing cards at any time of the day. Following the foiled Carnation affair, in which a plan was hatched to help Marie Antoinette escape, the Richards were replaced by the warden of La Force prison, Monsieur Bolt, and his wife. The Bolt's wardenship did not last long. Marie Antoinette's lengthy trial began with a 15-hour session on the 14th of October and a 24-hour session over the 15th and 16th of October. After 10 weeks in the Conciergerie, the Queen's incarceration was coming to an end. The verdict of the jury was affirmative. It was 4:30 a.m. when she heard her sentence: death by guillotine. She didn't utter a single word. After guards returned Marie Antoinette to her cell, she asked Warden Bolt for a pen and paper. He complied, and she wrote a letter to Elizabeth, the late King's sister. "I write to you, my sister, for the last time. I have been condemned not to an ignominious death that only awaits criminals, but to go and rejoin your brother, innocent as he. I hope to show the same firmness as he did in his last moments. I grieve bitterly at leaving my poor children. You know that I existed but for them and you who have by your friendship sacrificed all to be with us." When the Queen finished the letter, she reportedly kissed each page repeatedly, folded it without sealing it, and gave it to Warden Bolt. The gendarme standing guard outside the cell likely observed this, because when Bolt left the Queen, the guard confiscated the letter and it was taken to Fouquier-Tinville. Elizabeth would never receive the Queen's last testament. At 11 a.m. the next morning, on the 16th of October 1793, the executioner Sanson appeared. Marie Antoinette, clad in simple white, so different from her signature powder blue silks and satins, accidentally stepped on Sanson's foot. She whispered to the man, "Pardon me, sir. I didn't mean to." Those were her last words. After the blade fell, the insensitive executioner, who had shortly beforehand cut off and pocketed locks of her hair to be later sold for profit, held up her head to the roaring crowd, which shouted, "Vive la République! Vive la République!" Marie Antoinette's remains were taken to a graveyard behind the church of Medellin, about a half a mile north, but the grave diggers were taking a lunch break. That gave Marie Grosholz, later known as Madame Tussaud, enough time to make a wax imprint of her face before she was placed in an unmarked grave. Decades later, in 1815, Louis XVI's younger brother exhumed Marie Antoinette's body and gave it a proper burial at the Basilica of Saint-Denis. All that remained of her, beside her bones and some of her white hair, were 2 garters in mint condition. Well, my dear friends, I hope you're still with me after that presentation. Yes, Marie Antoinette's story I've been meaning to cover for quite some time. Her sad fate has stayed with me all these years. I remember reading about Marie Antoinette some decades ago, and it just saddened me. I don't think it's the life that she wanted. She didn't have any choice. She was, a political pawn, and, taken to a country where she wasn't well liked. The Austrians were not liked by the French. It must have been a very, very sad time for her, and at such a tender age, and what a horrible end. I mean, of course she had that privileged life. What else was she going to do? She wasn't living in poverty, so, she just made the best of it and enjoyed herself and enjoyed her youth. I don't blame her, but what a terrible end. Any historians of the French Revolution out there, correct me if I'm wrong, feel obliged, but isn't it the case that the aristocracy were very annoyed that Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were trying to make reforms and trying to get the aristocracy to pay taxes, which they did not want to do, and that they were actually stirring up unrest with the people, and they were encouraging these salacious pamphlets and pornographic literature about Marie Antoinette and about Louis XVI to circulate around Paris. And basically it backfired on them, because after the king and queen were executed, it was their turn next. They weren't reckoning on that, but I think that was the case. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Yeah, this picture you're seeing on the screen here is apparently a surviving locket of her hair, although I couldn't find any real proof that it is. Probably they don't have any DNA from Marie Antoinette. Probably if the bones are still in existence, they're probably too old to give up any DNA. But that's apparently a locket of her hair. And the next picture you see. Yes, so these two images, the image on the left although my French is very rusty. I think it was the chair that she was using at the conciergerie, and I don't know whether this relic still survives. The image appears to be a postcard from the 1930s or 40s, so I'd be interested if anyone out there knows, anyone in France, or anyone who's visited that museum, if it's still in existence. Yeah, and the picture on the right is apparently of the guillotine blade that executed Marie Antoinette. The blade was given to the executioner and his family afterwards, and which they kept. So that's a bit of a gruesome relic from that time. Quite horrible. Yes, apparently Marie Grossholtz, who later became known as Madame Tussaud, she nearly lost her head too in the French Revolution. You know, there was a lot of people losing their heads. Fingers were being pointed in every direction, and she was accused of being a traitor to the French people. Yeah, so they promptly bunged her in prison to await her execution. And before her arrest, she had been running around making death masks of the elite that had their heads removed. And yeah, it was only her teacher was a Swiss guy. I didn't even know this myself. She was taught how to mould in wax and do all these things by a Swiss doctor, and he was the one that saved her life. He actually persuaded the tribunal that she was definitely pro-republic and on their side, etc., doing all the right things, and they were convinced and they let her go. So she had a lucky escape herself. Yeah, on a lighter note, did you know that the official portrait painter to Marie Antoinette and her children was Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun? I hope I pronounced that correctly. And I was a real fan of Vigée-Lebrun's work since I was a teenager. I really liked her delicate style and realistic and just beautiful. It's vibrant. And many years later, it must have been destiny. I was checking out stuff on an online auction, and I saw a little pastel portrait. Nothing really significant. You'll see it on the screen in a minute. And there was no name. It was anonymous. There was just something about it that struck me, and I thought, I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that. I could see that it was old, and it definitely had something very special emanating from it. So I bid for it, and someone was bidding against me. I got it for $500, about the equivalent of $500 at the end of the auction. And anyway, I received it through the post, and I was racking my brains because something was telling me that this was a well-known artist, and I couldn't figure out. The whole weekend, my dear Oddites, I was really getting my subconscious to delve deep, and I was researching on the internet, and on the Sunday evening I shouted for Odette to come up the stairs. I said, I think this is it. I think this is the artist that has done my pastel portrait. And in my opinion, it was Vigée-Lebrun. I was so excited. I thought, I'm just so confident that it was her. And you know, I contacted the Wildenstein Institute. They have an expert there on Vigée-Lebrun. I wrote him an email. And normally they charge you a fortune, you know, for an expertise, for an expert evaluation of something. But I just wrote him an email very casually. I told him the story. I bought this on an online auction. He was the official expert. He is the official expert for Vigée-Lebrun. And he wrote back and he said, well, you've got a jackpot. He said, it's definitely from her. It's definitely from her hand. I just couldn't believe it. It was so nice of him just to write back and not charge me any fee for that. And yeah, so I do have something connected to Marie Antoinette. Well, when I say connected, you know, it was drawn by the hand that had touched Marie Antoinette's hand at some time, undoubtedly. So there is a connection indirectly. And this was from Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun's own hand. That was like a double bonus that I had something from one of my favourite artists. And I think it must have been destiny. I think Elizabeth must have wanted me to have this portrait, because you know that she also was under threat of losing her head in the French Revolution, and she had to flee Paris. She had to go and travel all the back roads by coach and stay at people's places until she eventually got through to Switzerland, where she remained for quite some years doing portraits for the nobility and eking out a living doing that. I think she went to Russia also for some years before it was safe for her to return to Paris after it all the big hullabaloo had died down. So yeah, I thought I'd share that with you, my dear viewers, my little bit of connection to Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. Well, anyway, I think on that note, I've rambled enough, and it was great having you along for the ride. We've survived the revolution. I'm not really sure what story I'm doing next. Maybe give me some ideas, but I think I know. I think I know what I'm doing next. I do, actually. I've got a couple of stories in mind. I've got a couple of cases in mind. And for the teaser one next time, it's going to be a random draw. It's going to be a random one. All you have to do is comment in the teaser notification. Make your comment, and once you're in there, you'll go in the virtual hat to win. I think it might be another mug. We might do another mug draw. See, if you like that idea. And I have an idea also for another teaser image in the future where I will hide my name somewhere in the image, and the first person to find it will win a prize. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. God bless. Take care. And see you later, my friends.